Well, hello, Nativity Bible Heads. It is Dr. Wayne, and it is time for Sunday Morning Power Bible Study. We are dealing with the text assigned for Proper 8b, which is in amongst the Sundays after Pentecost. 2 Samuel chapter 1. Not everything out of chapter 1, but I'll explain that later. And then we're going to do Psalm 30, not Psalm 130, but Psalm 30. 2 Corinthians 8, 7 to 15, and then Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43. Nothing to it but to do it, right? In 2 Samuel, now notice 2 Samuel. We've been in 1 Samuel. We've been talking about David's rise to power. What happened between last week, which was David and Goliath, the David and Goliath story, and this week, what happened between the two was Saul was killed in battle, okay? And in 2 Samuel chapter 1, very first verse, it says, after the death of Saul, when David had returned from defeating the Amalekites, David remained 2 days in Ziklag. So let's first talk a little bit about what was going on here. Saul had been in battle. The Amalekites are significant in that there was this incident in Saul's reign where Saul did not totally devote the spoils to God, and he violated the rules of haram. And that is one of the things that led to his downfall, because it proved that he didn't have a heart for God because he didn't practice the holy war properly, the haram. So consequently, for it to say here that, oh, David returned after defeating who? The Amalekites, which is what Saul didn't properly do himself. Saul, or David, did do, right? David remained 2 days in Ziklag. This is where he was holed up with his own little private army. Now, our passage in our reading skips from all the way to verse 17, and it starts a lamentation that David has for Saul's death. In those verses, we get a story. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, but we get a story of an Amalekite. By the way, the Amalekites had not a tradition, they were known for being scavengers of sorts, and they would happen upon things, and they were kind of not exactly above board type people with regard to honesty and such. Well, anyway, an Amalekite comes to David, and this is before David knows about Saul's death. And it says that this Amalekite, I know I said this before David knows of Saul's death, but it says here, after the death of Saul, at the very beginning, right? Well, this Amalekite comes to David trying to take credit for it, thinking that David is going to be kind to him because he brings him some spoils from Saul. What does he bring? It looks to me like, from what I read here, it looks like he brings his crown, okay? And and he tells a story of how Saul was already mortally wounded, but yet not dead, and that he requested of this Amalekite to actually finish him off, which he did. And this is something that David did not take kindly to, okay? And so the guy claims to have finished off Saul, taken his crown and armlet, that's what it was that an arm ring type thing, and as kind of proof, and hoping probably to get some remuneration. But no, what did he get instead from David? Was David's wrath. Long story short, David has the guy killed. Yeah, and David has the purest of motives. and that his respect for Saul as king never diminished, because he saw him as God saw him, which was as the anointed, the one. And so David's grief that he expresses via the having him killed gets followed up by this lament that starts in verses 17 and following. David intoned this lamentation over Saul and his son Jonathan. We haven't heard much about Jonathan. Jonathan was a friend of David. He was the oldest son of Saul, and by divine right of kings and primogeniture should be the next king type thing. But he was very close to David, and we get a picture of that in this lamentation. And then in parentheses, we have, he ordered that the song of the bow be taught to the people of Judah, as it is written in the book of Jeshar. This is a reference to the fact that frequently when we have a lamentation, it's set to a certain tune. And this is a specification in the narrative of what the tune should be. And obviously it would have been a known one because it's called the Song of the Bow. It just said the bow, but the setting is we don't get the music in Scripture. We just get the lyrics. Okay, as is written in the book of Jeshar. By the way, as is written in the book of Jeshar, we have a ton of references like this in, especially in the Deuteronomistic history. Also, we get it in the book of Psalms, with references to some book or some tune, something extra biblical. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible that points to stuff outside the Bible, okay? Which teaches us more about the nature of Scripture. Anyway, here is where the lamentation begins. He said, "Your glory, O Israel, lies slain upon your high places. How the mighty have fallen." Yeah, so this is his beginning of this lamentation over Saul, right? He is one of the mighty, and the fact that the king was a representative of the whole, the singular as a representative of the plural. It's the glory of Israel, right? He lies slain, right? "Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon." This is to say, those cities were Philistine cities, right? And that was the context for Saul's death was against the Philistine. Remember, that's what Goliath was, a Philistine, right? Well, he's saying, well, don't let the Philistines know, because they might be a little bit too happy about this. Get this. Or the daughters of the Philistines will rejoice. Yeah. "Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, or the daughters of the Philistines will rejoice." We don't want them to rejoice over this, because they will, because that's how big of a deal Saul was. "The daughters of the circumcised will exult." Yeah, we don't want them to be happy, so we don't want them to know, right? "You mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew or rain upon you, nor bounteous fields." Why is it referencing Mount Gilboa? Why is it putting a curse on Mount Gilboa? That's where Saul was killed, okay? That's where that final battle was. "For there the shield of the mighty was defiled." See the reference to Saul. "The shield of Saul anointed with oil no more." The shield of Saul anointed with shields. A lot of times they weren't made of metal. They were made of leather that had been oiled down. Okay, and so that's one of the references here. Anointed with oil. The shield of Saul anointed with oil no more. It's like no more preparing for battle. "From the blood of the slain, from the fat of the mighty, the bow of Jonathan did not turn back, nor the sword of Saul return empty." This strophe gives us a very telling picture that this was a bloody battle that they were involved in, where they lost their lives, okay? "Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely." By the words, the beloved and lovely, the word beloved is a Hebrew word that expresses a physical appearance. They were both very striking figures, okay, to the eyes anyway. And lovely communicates his affections for them, okay? So to say beloved and lovely is referring first to the physical appearance and second to them, what they meant for him in his heart, right? Saul and Jonathan, beloved and lovely, in life and in death, they were not divided. Well, they actually were a little bit. They weren't exactly on the same page. But this is one of the things that we get in lament. We get kind of like what we get in a eulogy. You get the fondest remembrances. You get the things that we want to emphasize the most, the best of what there is, okay, to remember of a person. They were swifter than eagles. They were stronger than lions. Yes, this is outright exaggeration. And this teaches us what lamentation looks like and why it's actually valuable. Yeah. The reason why it is because it gives us permission to look past people's deficiencies and idealize who they were in our memory. And that's what we tend to do. That's what an appropriate thing is to do for people's deaths. O daughters of Israel, weep over Saul, who clothed you with crimson in luxury, who put ornaments of gold on your apparel. There were professional mourners, women who were paid to be mourning, and this is a part of the process that was common in that culture, right? Who clothed you? Yeah. Saul made it so that you were actually in could make you rich, okay? Saul's, again, this is an example of idealizing what Saul made possible for the people when he was king. Jonathan, how the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. We've heard that expression before, right? How the mighty have fallen, that we had that back in at the beginning of this psalm, right? I'm calling it a psalm, but it's a lament, right? But a lot of the psalms are laments. Anyway, how the mighty have fallen in the midst of the battle. Jonathan lies slain upon your high places. Yeah, we had the expression of Saul being, your glory lies slain upon your high places. Here we have Jonathan lies slain upon your high places. I am distressed for you, my brother Jonathan. Greatly beloved were you to me. Your love to me was wonderful, passing the love of women. I think here what David is trying to do, he's trying to find the words to say basically that his friendship with Jonathan was something that was so intense. It was so close to him. It was so wonderful that it's like he loved him like he loved himself. Okay, that's why when it says surpassing the love of women, it means like I love them not as I would love another person, but as I would love myself. Yeah. And then verse 27, how the mighty have fallen and the weapons of war perished. This lament can be holy speech when we allow it to be a vehicle for us to process our grief. One of the things that is good about what we have in our scripture, especially with the laments, is the validation it gives us for the human experience, all right? And we're always going to struggle for the words, but it does show us that how do we respond to tragedy? We've got to let it out, okay? That's why we have funerals. That's why we have words of eulogy as well. Sometimes they can take the form of even being vindictive against the persons who, whoever did this type thing. That's a part of our healing process. It doesn't necessarily mean, we don't want to get in a judgmental space with regard to where our thoughts can go and what thoughts can race through our brains when we're upset about stuff like this. But we just need to accept that that's a part of the human experience, and it is a necessary step in our grief process so we can move on, okay? Speaking of moving on, we're going to now look at Psalm 30. Psalm 30. Does it or does it not have a tie-in to Saul's death? Let us see what we can hear and discern, all right? I will extol you, O Lord, for you have drawn me up and did not let my foes rejoice over me. Not exactly something Saul could have said, now was it? Or Jonathan. Maybe if we think of it in terms of David and him not letting his grief, totally incapacitate him or shut him down, maybe we could look at it like that. Possibly, right? O Lord my God, I cried to you for help, and you have healed me. O Lord, you brought up my soul from Sheol. That's the place of the dead. Whenever we see a Sheol, remember that there is no hell in the Old Testament. In the Hebrew Bible, there is no hell. There is no, flames or whatever like we see in the New Testament. We just have this talk of a place called Sheol, which is just the place where the dead go. Just something that, a space, physically is something seen as just below the ground, okay? That was Sheol, just a place of the dead. Not a judgmental type of a place, just a place. The dead got to go somewhere. Where do they go? They go down the place of the dead. Sheol. I cried to you for help, and you have healed me. Oh Lord, you brought up my soul from Sheol, restored me to life from among those who've gone down to the pit. The pit is another expression for Sheol, right? Sing praises to the Lord, O you, his faithful ones, and give thanks to his holy name, for his anger is but for a moment. His favor is for a lifetime. Weeping may linger for the night, but joy comes in the morning. Not a bad expression of the way grief works, right? As for me, I said in my prosperity, I shall never be moved. By your favor, O Lord, you had established me as a strong mountain. You hid your face. I was dismayed. To you, O Lord, I cried, and to the Lord I made supplication. What profit is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Will the dust praise you? Will it tell of your faithfulness? Hear, O Lord, and be gracious to me. O Lord, be my helper. Yeah, frequently in the Psalms, when we are expressing, a sense of like, I don't want to die kind of a thing, and then we get into this bargaining thing with God and saying like, but just think of it. It really doesn't benefit you a whole lot, Lord, if I die, because the dust isn't going to praise you, but I will, that kind of a thing. That's what we got there. You have turned my mourning into dancing. You have taken off my sackcloth and clothed me with joy, so that my joy may praise you and not be silent. O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. All right, very good. Let's move on. We're going to our epistle lesson, which is in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. This time, one of the things we need to keep in mind with regard to Paul what is this? Remember, Paul was from, or Paul's ministry set out from Jerusalem, right? He knew where the hotbed of the church was. And how did he initially get financed? Well, he initially got financed by the church that was close to in the home country, Jerusalem, right? But we got to remember, what is it that happened though in 70 AD that put it's like from 70 AD and for the next quite a few decades, if not centuries, where the Palestinian Christians were impoverished because they were in a state of war. Remember, the Romans sacked Jerusalem and destroyed the temple in 70 AD, and this is not that different from the time that Paul was away from them. And now they had a need, okay? So the situation here is that the Jewish Christian churches of Jerusalem and the old Palestine area, they were impoverished. They needed help now. So Paul is now trying to raise support from the churches that he's started up so he can actually take an offering from these outer churches to help the poor church of Jerusalem, okay? Apparently there was a commitment early on, and Paul is now trying to get them to fulfill on it. And so here we get a justification and a way of reasoning for him to spur them on to completing that commitment. Verse 7. Now, as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in utmost eagerness, and in our love for you, so we want you to excel also in this generous undertaking. Get the context now? Isn't that important that you know that? I do not say this as a command, but I am testing the genuineness of your love against the earnestness of others. So he's kind of doing a little playing off of like, let's see if you're going to, we don't want you to be like some other people who've been, getting out of their commitment, right? For you know, now he's going to play the Jesus card here, right? For you know the generous act of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that by his poverty you might become rich. He goes all the way back to referring to exactly what he knew the gospel story was, which was Jesus doing something for us when we didn't deserve it, saving us, and being willing to pay that price, that of having his life taken, right? This is his model he wants them to then follow. So the way of Christ, of sacrificing of self, giving something up for the benefit of others, becomes a paradigm of Christian morality, Christian ethics, Christian way of being, okay? And in this matter, I am giving my advice. It is appropriate for you, who began last year, not only to do something, but even to desire to do something. Remember the commitment to the churches to give this money. Now finish doing it, so that your eagerness may be matched by completing it according to your means. Yeah. Follow through with that. Have your word mean something. Have your commitment actually mean something. For if the eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. For if the eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has. Yeah. This has to do with Paul's philosophy of proportional sacrifice. Proportional giving is one thing. Proportional sacrifice is another. And that's what he's putting forth, that we need to sacrifice proportionately, right? Which means we don't all give the same amount, but we all give the same proportion in that, what it is that represents our support, right? I do not mean that there should be relief for others and pressure on you, but it is a question of a fair balance between your present abundance and their need, so that their abundance may be for your need, in order that there may be a fair balance. Do you like that? So that their abundance may be for your need, in order that there may be a fair balance. So it's like there's a reciprocity here of their need. They have a need, and we can actually fill that need, and it makes us, and it balances everything out. This is the ideal. As it is written. Now, he's going to give us a quotation here from the book of Exodus, from the time when they were in the wilderness, and it's evidence for the fact that there came a time where they idealized the wilderness time and the wilderness experience of being with God, because those were the salad days, when life was actually good, before life got complicated. As it is written, here's the quote: "The one who had much did not have too much, and the one who had little did not have too little." This is quotation. Of course, we got to remember always, when we see quotations in our Greek New Testament from the Hebrew Bible, this is not necessarily going from the Hebrew Bible. It's going from the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, which is what the early church used as their Old Testament. Yeah. So if you were to look, I think it's in Exodus 18, 16, something like that. This is a reference to the Lord providing the manna, and the fact that there was just enough there for everyone. Everyone had whatever it was that they needed. Nobody had too much and nobody had too little. And it speaks to a time of idealized provision from God. And that if we just are in the right relationship with God, we're not going to have too much, and there's others aren't going to have too little, because we will want to spread the wealth and we will want to share it with everyone else. Okay, that's where our reading ends. I love Paul's logic and the way he makes this appeal. I think it is quite valuable when we talk about ourselves in terms of our own personal stewardship and what we give to God through the church as well. Okay. Mark chapter 5, verses 21 to 43. Now, last week we were in Mark chapter 4, and we had the calming of the stormy sea incident, right? There's an incident that happens at the beginning of chapter 5 in verses 1 through 20 that we don't get because we skipped to chapter 21. In verse 21, in those first 20 verses, Jesus is in Gentile territory, and he performs this exorcism that gets sent into this herd of swine, unclean animals, and so those possessed swine then go over a cliff and die, right? That was a significant event in Jesus' ministry, because in Mark, what we get is Jesus ministering equally to his own people and to the Gentiles, and making it clear that the terrain is even. The foot of the land is even. Nobody has more work to do than others to get to God. That what Jesus is doing is leveling the playing field, okay? So that incident of the pigs, the swine, and the casting the demons into that, and then the death of all that, Jesus is proclaiming a judgment on the whole clean, unclean controversy. It's like, okay, that's gone, all right? And it's ironic and apropos that it happens in the killing of a swineherd. Now, immediately after that, we see him doing some more healings, but it's specifically with his own people, with the Jews. Notice it says, when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side. So he's going across the Sea of Galilee a lot, right? Sometimes he's dealing with Gentiles, sometimes he's dealing with Jews. Here he's going to deal with Jews, and I'm going to tell you how we know that, even though it's not stated specifically with regard to both of them, but there's all kinds of signs in here. Number one, look, when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly. Oh, by the way, the synagogue in the days of that followed the destruction of the temple, the synagogues were very key. In fact, it was in the synagogues that the church arose, right? It was in the synagogues that there started to be a little confrontation between the Messianic Jews and the ones who were wanting to not recognize Jesus as the Messiah. And that's where the conflict started to arise in the synagogues. And that's one of the reasons why the church eventually separated themselves from the Jewish nest, because it became too uncomfortable. They didn't want to be not Jewish anymore, but it just didn't work out with the way it was, with the way they held on to Jesus as the true Messiah, right? So here we have a leader of the synagogue, which is great, who comes to Jesus. This is key because this is one of the things that we want to see. That Mark's purpose is he wants to see the people of the synagogue like reaching out to Jesus and wanting something from Jesus to in your gospel message, this is how you have proof of the validity of your hero, and this is what we get. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came in, and when he saw him, fell at his feet. He begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." So he went with him. Notice the expression of faith, which is what we want, because that's one of the things that we're dealing with was the fact that there were Jewish people in synagogues that weren't flocking to Jesus. Now, we're going to, the way Mark tells this story, he cuts away from it to tell us another story, and then he comes back to it, right? So the situation is, my little daughter is at the point of death, and he's wanting her to be healed, right? So this intercalation, this practice that Mark does from time to time, provides an opportunity for one story to develop in time so that something else can happen, and it helps us translate each other, or not translate each other, it helps us to interpret each other, right? And a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now, there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. The 12 years, that's a very much a covenant number with regard to the Jewishness of who she was, and reminiscent of the people he was amongst, right? There was a woman he'd been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. By the way, if you're a hemorrhaging woman, you are not allowed to be out amongst people. You are not allowed to be letting other people touch you even. You are essentially making everybody who rubs your elbow ritually unclean. And this woman takes a bold step in deciding, oh, I'm not going to let that stop me. I'm going to get my healing. I'm going to get my healing on. And I don't care what the rules say. I'm not following the rules. I know this Jesus can give me what I need. I am not interested in following no stinking rules. Okay, watch this. She had endured much under many physicians and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Notice the expression of faith, right? Just really a bold attitude, right? And action for her to take. Immediately, her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately, aware that power had gone out from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd passing in on you? How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." Notice this is one of the few places where he doesn't say anything like about showing yourself to the priests, which he does sometimes to lepers. A lot of times you have to show evidence to the authorities that you are no longer ritually unclean to get their certification. He doesn't even say that. This is a bold expression that follows in line with what Jesus had done with the pigs and the demon and the pigs in the Gentile territory of we're tanking it. We're tanking all this stuff. It had its purpose. It's done now. Okay. And by him not suggesting that she go present herself to the priests and all that to get herself reinstated, it's like, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. Simple as that. This is a part of the revolutionary nature of Jesus in his healings that didn't exactly sit well with most everybody. While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, so now we're getting back to the original story. And it says the leaders, referring to Jairus, that's the leader of the synagogue, right? Now that story has progressed. Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? Yeah, what's the use now? She's dead. But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And that's your expression. Sometimes you hire people to do that. When he had entered, he said to them. Now, we don't know if Jesus is just being cheesy here. We don't know if we're supposed to take him literally here, but he is definitely we definitely get a sense of a dramatic reveal, okay? Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, little girl, get up. That's the translation of that. Little girl, get up, Talitha. Talitha cum. And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. So we've already got the Jewishness of her because of the fact that she was the daughter of Jairus, the synagogue leader. And we got the Jewishness of the other woman in that it mentioned that she'd had her problem for 12 years. Now we get the 12 years of age of the age of the daughter. So it emphasizes the Jewish nature of all of this, right? And so consequently, and by the way, if she had totally been dead, as they said, where it says your daughter is dead, if she had been totally dead, the fact that Jesus was willing to be in her presence. Notice it said he took her by the hand. You can't touch a dead body in Judaism, but these healings are an escalation of Jesus claiming authority over the Mosaic law. And he does that. And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them, no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Okay, I think I made my point here with regard to what Jesus is about and what Jesus is doing. Blessings on your season after Pentecost. Until next time, peace.